Hello, welcome to Orphan Espresso. I'm Doug.
I'm Barb.
And right now, this is the first in a series of two videos discussing the Hario Skerton Kyocera CM-50 coffee mills and the upgrade to a good coarse grinding grinder for French press or other coarse grinds. Now, first, let's talk about these grinders. Hario Skerton here, Kyocera CM-50 here. You notice quite a similarity as you look through the packaging. As you see, they seem to be the same grinder. There's a few cosmetic differences. There's a few here. All of the writing on this box is in Japanese and this box is in English. This one very clearly says in English, made in China. This one, I think, says in Japanese, made in China, but that's just my opinion. I don't read Japanese. Let's look inside and look at these two grinders. These are very economical grinders. They have a ceramic burr and there's the two side by side. Translucent, solid plastic. This glass made by Hario on the Kyocera. This glass made by Hario. Virtually identical. Cosmetically, slightly different. Now let's look at the burr. Take this off. I'm going to take this one up. I don't want to confuse them. Now, there we see the burr of each one. Basically identical. The only difference is this metal band marked Hario, this metal band that holds the outer burr unmarked. Top mechanism, identical. Let's look a little farther. This is the classic top adjust mill. There's a little washer. Let's look a little farther. Hario. Take these pieces off. Kyocera CM-50. Now that we've established that they're pretty much the same grinder, we have been dealing with the CM-50 for quite a while and have had some very good success with our Performance for Press CM-50 modification. We have been asked numerous times, will this modification work on the Skerton? Well, this is the first Skerton that we've gotten. The answer is yes. As you see, they're pretty much identical grinder. But before we go any farther, let's talk about how these grinders work. Now, you notice how the inner burr generally just falls right in. And part of the reason that it centers so nicely is that there's nothing down on the bottom. There's no lower bearing. The only bearing is up here at the top, as you see. It's like a clapper in a bell. But on a fine setting, this is part of the secret of fine grinding, is a good centering. But you'll note that this is tightened all the way down, nicely centered. We loosen it up a little more, a little more. You'll notice that things start to go wrong once you're not grinding on the tight settings. Now, our feeling on this is that when the consumer purchases a hand grinder, the first thing they do is they set it as tight as it'll go, and they say, "Wow, that grinds great." And that's the basic consumer test: is that you want it on a tight setting. You want to grind fine. You want to grind for espresso, which these can. It has a stepped adjustment, so you have to have just the right machine to do this with, just the right technique. But as you go out to the coarser and coarser grinds, you start to lose a lot of stability in that burr. Now, the principle behind these top adjust mills, whether they're Zassenhaus, which currently makes a top adjust mill, or these ceramic burr grinders from the Asian grinders, is that when the burr loads up with coffee, when the small blades are completely loaded with coffee, that serves as a self-centering mechanism. That they can't move around because they're compacted with coffee inside of the burr. And that's part of the principle. The catch is that any type of interruption in the grind, in the very beginning, the burr has to load. So there's a period of inconsistency, especially on the coarser grind, the coarser settings. The burr has to load. Now once the burr loads, it will continue to stay more or less centered, more or less stable, until there is some possible interruption. And this is not uncommon with these grinders. It's not uncommon that if you look at these veins in here that support the center bearing, it's really not that uncommon for a hang-up in the beans to occur. And the beans will stop feeding into the burr. When this happens, the burr empties. As you turn the handle, this clapper effect, especially on a coarse grind I'm talking about. Fine grinding is no problem because of this self-centering phenomenon. And they'll self-center through fine drip. Once you get into medium drip, coarse, back, then they start to lose self-centering. But any time that there's some type of interruption, such as the beans will hang up in these veins and you have to give it a little shake or tap the whole thing on the counter. And this is just a practical reality. But if there's an interruption, then you start getting more inconsistencies until the burr loads once again. Now, at the end of the grind, this is another period where there's inconsistencies on the coarse grind, because you have some beans will be feeding down one side and not the other, and there's various kinetically there's parts of the grind cycle for coarse grinding that just cause too many fines, inconsistencies in the grind, big chunks happen, and so we have found that this is just, they're great for fine. But if you want to get into coarse, you want to have a good economical French press fat pot grinder, that our solution was to make a bearing that's just like this. This is inspired by the 1930s era Peugeot hand mills, which are very, very good for French press, but they don't make them anymore. And this is a lower bearing. This is already set up. This is our personal model. There's a lower bearing that, you see it in there, Barb? It's installed.
Not well.
You get some light in there. It's installed.
I think you can see just part of it.
Above this outer bearing. And it basically stabilizes this slop and the flop that you were seeing. So in this case, it's installed, and you can see, I'll turn it to the side, you can see that we're at a fairly close setting. This is a good setting for French press. And at this case, you have gotten rid of the wobble. Okay? Now, here's the catch. These grinders, they're either, you can use this, the bearing, we call this the performs for press. The PFP, you would want to say perfect for press, but nothing's perfect. It performs for press. This little guy here. Another inconsistency in these grinders is they use these small nylon washers at the top and the bottom here. You have to disassemble you have to take the burr off the axle to install the bearing. This is our third iteration of this bearing, and each time we make it a little more specific and a little more specific, and we've got the tolerances down to the fact that there's just very little wobble at all at this point. And this is a washer that we basically have to make by filing it out with an oblong hole in the center, and it goes between it goes in place of this little plastic washer. Now, the catch is, and that's the reason I'm making this video, is
So it replaces that plastic
it
washer?
replaces the plastic washer to give a larger area. And you'll see that if you watch our next video, which is the installation of this package, you'll see why you have to use this one as well. The catch is that once you have, see, once again, self-centering on the fines, that's why they work so well. But if you note this one, when you go down to a fine setting on this, I have to take my angle off, and let me go down let me pull that one down. You don't have quite the same action. Of course, this has coffee loaded in the burrs. This is a used one. But you'll find that it's good for coarse and medium, but it's not so great for fine anymore. This is it turns out to be an either-or situation. You either have a good fine grinding, you install the bearing stabilization system in either the Skerton or the CM-50, and you have a really good coarse grinder, very good for French press, for the price. We're not talking about a Ditting or a big batch grinder or anything like this. We're talking about a fairly inexpensive grinder. Some people at this price consider such a thing disposable, but I don't feel it should be disposable. You know, I mean, we don't do that kind of stuff. We don't use things and throw them away. But anyway, the principle is self-centering for fine grinding. Absolutely great. Not so good for coarse grinding. Addition of a stabilizing bearing in the bottom, very good for coarse grinding, but you lose the self-centering effect for the fine grinding. Basically, the gist of what I want to say: CM-50, Hario Skerton, pretty much the same mill, as you can see all the way through. A few cosmetic differences. They grind the same, they look the same, they're very good grinders. And this is the introductory video. If you are interested in finding out more about this performance for press bearing, then come back to the next video and I'll demonstrate just how to install this, because we are now offering this as a kit, as a coarse grinding mod for both the Skerton and the CM-50. And so come back, I'll show you how to install it, and you'll just see what it's all about.